It was nearly midnight, and the diner was almost empty. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the smell of old coffee lingered in the air. Most of the staff had already clocked out, eager to escape the slow drizzle outside. But Tasha, a 27-year-old waitress with a warm smile and tired eyes, stayed behind. Not because she had to, but because she knew someone, somewhere, might still need a hot meal and a little kindness. That's when he walked in. Soaked from the rain, hoodie pulled low over his face, the man looked more like a drifter than a billionaire. Most wouldn't have given him a second glance. But Tasha didn't hesitate. She grabbed a towel, poured a fresh cup of coffee, and offered him the last bowl of hot soup on the house. What she didn't know was that the man she just served was Elon Musk. The next morning, Tasha was called into the manager's office. No thank you, no praise, just a pink slip. You broke policy, they said. We don't serve walk-ins after hours, and definitely not for free. Fired. For being kind. Tasha walked out in silence, holding back tears. But what happened next shocked the world. Because while her manager saw a rule breaker, Elon Musk saw something else entirely. A woman who acted with heart when no one was watching. And by the time the internet caught wind of what happened, it was already too late for the diner to undo their mistake. This is the story of how one waitress lost everything in a moment, only to gain the world the very next day. The clock on the wall ticked past 11:48 p.m. The diner was quiet now, stripped of the usual clatter of plates and murmur of customers. Only the distant hum of a dishwasher and the soft patter of rain against the windows remained. Tasha moved slowly behind the counter, wiping it down for the third time that night, not because it needed it, but because it kept her mind off everything else. Rent was due in 3 days. Her phone bill was overdue, and her shoes, once black, had faded to a dull gray from all the double shifts she'd taken that month. But still, she smiled. That was just Tasha. She had a smile that stayed, even when life didn't give her much to smile about. Tonight had been like any other. A few late-night regulars, a couple on a date who barely tipped, a delivery driver who asked for extra ketchup and left a mess. And now, the place was winding down to a crawl. The manager, Chuck, had already slipped into the back office, leaving her alone to finish the close. She stretched her legs behind the counter, her feet aching beneath her. Her shift would be over in 12 minutes. Then the bell above the door jingled. Tasha turned. A man stepped in, soaked from the rain. He wore a hoodie pulled low, water dripping from the hem. His jeans clung to his legs. He looked out of place, not dangerous, just worn. His shoulders were hunched, and his face was hidden beneath the shadow of his hood. He didn't speak. He simply stood there, cold and quiet, as if unsure if he even belonged. Tasha glanced at the clock. 11:49 p.m. Technically, the diner was closed. The policy was clear. No walk-ins after 11:45. Chuck had reminded her of that rule more times than she could count. You let one person in, and they all start coming in. Boundaries, Tasha. Boundaries. But she looked at the man again. Something about him felt heavy, not dangerous, just tired. The kind of tired that ran deeper than just a long day. The kind of tired that clung to your bones. She stepped from behind the counter. "Sir," she called gently, "are you okay?" The man looked up, just for a second. His eyes were sharp, intelligent, but weary. He nodded, but said nothing. "You hungry?" she asked. He nodded again. "We're closed," she said softly, then paused. "But I haven't locked the kitchen yet." The man looked surprised. "I could warm you up some soup," she offered. "It's not fancy, but it's hot. You look like you could use something warm." He hesitated. Then quietly, "I'd appreciate that." Tasha smiled and gestured toward a booth by the window. "Sit tight. I'll be right back." She disappeared into the kitchen, moving quickly but carefully. She found the last bowl of chicken noodle soup and put it in the microwave. As it warmed, she poured a fresh cup of coffee, black, no sugar. She didn't ask if he wanted cream. Something told her he liked it bitter. By the time she returned, the man had taken off his hoodie. His hair was slightly disheveled. His face was wet, not just from the rain, but maybe from something else. Grief, maybe, or exhaustion. He gave her a soft thank you as she placed the bowl in front of him. "You sure you're okay?" she asked again. He looked at her. This time his eyes lingered. There was something searching in his gaze, like he was trying to figure her out. "Yeah," he said finally. "Just a long day." Tasha nodded. "Well, long days are my specialty. If you need anything, just wave." He smiled faintly. "Thank you, Tasha," he said, reading her name tag. She blinked. She hadn't told him her name. She watched him for a moment, then turned back to finish her cleanup. Just another shift, she told herself. But something about tonight felt different. The rain outside had shifted from a drizzle to a downpour, thrumming against the diner's windows like a soft drumbeat. The world beyond the glass was a blur of streaking headlights and puddles catching the orange glow of the streetlights. Inside, the warmth of the diner wrapped around the man like a fragile blanket, though he made no move to relax. He sat rigidly in the booth, eyes cast downward, fingers wrapped around the warm coffee cup Tasha had brought him moments earlier. She moved quietly around him, wiping tables and resetting silverware as if the man weren't even there. But her eyes darted his way more than once. Something about him pulled at her. Not in the way of fear or suspicion. No, it was the stillness, the silence. Like he was here, but somewhere else entirely. She caught the name on his hoodie, worn and faded, almost unreadable. SpaceX. She smiled to herself. Probably some old merchandise. Maybe he found it at a thrift store. The man hadn't touched the soup. Tasha, ever the attentive host even when off the clock, approached gently. "Is it not warm enough?" she asked, nodding toward the untouched bowl. He looked up at her. His eyes were distant but alert, like someone used to thinking 5 steps ahead, even in the middle of nowhere. "It's perfect," he said. "Just thinking." "Soup's not going to fix what's in your head," she said, smiling, "but it might make it easier to deal with." He gave a soft chuckle. "You always this kind to strangers?" Tasha shrugged. "You looked like you needed it." There was a pause, the kind of quiet that wasn't awkward, just heavy with unspoken stories. The man studied her, and something in his expression shifted, like recognition or maybe appreciation. "You ever feel like the world just forgets you?" he asked suddenly. Tasha blinked. She wasn't expecting that. "All the time," she said honestly. He nodded, staring into his cup. "Feels strange to have everything and still feel invisible." Tasha raised an eyebrow. "Everything?" He didn't answer right away, just sipped his coffee. "I used to think success would make things simpler," he murmured. "Turns out it just changes how people misunderstand you." She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Well, people misunderstand me all the time. Think I'm just a waitress with no plans, no purpose." "You're not?" Tasha smirked. "Nope. I'm a waitress with big plans and even bigger purpose. Just don't have the money for either yet." The man chuckled again, this time more freely. It was the first real sign of life she'd seen in him since he stepped in from the rain. "You remind me of someone," he said. "Yeah?" Tasha asked, tilting her head. "My mother," he replied. "She worked hard, every single day. People underestimated her until they didn't." There was something in his voice, not just admiration, pride, and pain. Tasha smiled. "She sounds like a queen." "She is," he said simply. Another silence passed, but this one felt warmer, easier. Then the kitchen door creaked open. Chuck appeared, rubbing his eyes like he'd just woken up from a nap in the office. "Tasha," he barked, his voice slicing through the calm. "What's this?" Tasha stood straight. "He was soaked and hungry. I gave him the leftover soup. I'll pay for it if I have to." Chuck's eyes narrowed as he looked at the man in the booth, judging him immediately by his clothes, the mess of his hair, the fact that he wasn't supposed to be there. "We don't serve strays after hours. You know that." Tasha didn't respond. Not yet. But the man, the quiet, soaked stranger, slowly stood. And in that moment, the entire diner shifted. Not because of what he did, but because of who he was. Chuck's face twisted into that familiar, impatient scowl Tasha knew too well. The kind that always came before something unnecessary was said. He took a few steps toward the booth, eyes locked on the man like he was a stain on the tile. "I don't care who you are," Chuck snapped. "We're closed. You need to leave." The man didn't flinch, didn't argue. He just looked at Chuck for a long, steady moment, then nodded slowly and reached for his hoodie. "It's okay," he said calmly, with a voice low and measured. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble." Tasha stepped forward, heart pounding. "Chuck, I told him he could stay. It's one bowl of soup. The place was empty. He wasn't hurting anyone." Chuck turned on her like a switch had been flipped. "That's not your call to make." "I was the only one out here," she said, keeping her voice even. "He was soaked, man. Looked like he'd been walking in the storm for hours. What was I supposed to do? Ignore him?" "Yes," Chuck spat. "That's exactly what you were supposed to do. We have rules, Tasha. You don't get to rewrite them on a whim." The man had already slipped on his hoodie and was heading for the door, but he paused, just for a moment. He looked back at Tasha. Their eyes met. He gave her the faintest smile. Grateful. Quiet. A kind of goodbye. Then he disappeared into the rain. And just like that, the warmth he brought with him was gone. Tasha turned back to Chuck. "You didn't have to talk to him like that." Chuck shook his head, disappointment, or maybe something worse, written across his face. "You know what your problem is, Tasha. You think being nice makes you noble. But here, this is business, not a charity." Her hands clenched at her sides. It was a bowl of soup. It was a policy violation. That's strike 3. Her chest tightened. "You're serious?" He reached into the back office and pulled out an envelope. White, thin. Her name scrawled across the front in rushed pen. "This has been coming for a while," he said. "You're a great server, but you care too much. It gets in the way." She took the envelope. It trembled slightly in her fingers. "So, that's it?" "That's it." She didn't cry. Not yet. Not in front of him. She just nodded slowly, then untied her apron and folded it with shaking hands. She placed it gently on the counter, like it was something sacred, something earned. No one else said a word. The kitchen stayed silent. The walls didn't protest. The world just kept turning. She stepped outside into the rain. The water hit her skin like tiny knives, cold and unforgiving. Her coat was thin, Her shoes were soaked within seconds. But the numbness she felt wasn't from the weather. It was from the injustice. She had done something right, something human, and somehow it had cost her everything. No job, no backup plan, just a name tag, a letter, and a heart too full in a world that didn't care. She stood there under the flickering diner sign, the rain turning to mist in the glow of the streetlight. Her hair clung to her face. Cars passed by without a second glance. But what Tasha didn't know, what no one knew, was that the man who walked out into the storm had paused just around the corner. He stood under the awning of a closed bookstore, his hoodie dripping, his mind racing. He was quiet, still, but not gone. Because Tasha's kindness hadn't just filled his stomach, it had moved something inside him. And by morning, the world would know exactly who she had served, and just how far a simple act of kindness could go. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, the only sound breaking the low hum of the coffee machine. It was late. Too late for anyone decent to be out unless they had no choice. That's what Chuck always said. Ain't nothing good happens past 9, unless you're paying rent or serving it. Tasha had wiped down the last booth twice already, mostly just to keep her hands busy. She wasn't supposed to still be there, technically, but something told her to stay behind, just a little longer. A feeling in her gut, quiet but persistent. And then he walked in. Soaked to the bone. Jacket clinging to him like it was trying to hold him together. Hair flattened, face unreadable. He didn't speak, didn't gesture. He just stood there in the doorway like he wasn't sure he deserved to be inside. Tasha moved before she thought. "Sit wherever you like," she said gently, reaching for a coffee pot that had been idling on the burner. She didn't wait for permission. She poured him a cup, brought it over with 2 sugar packets and the only dry napkin left in the stack. He nodded once, a ghost of a thank you in his eyes. Still no words. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. The sound of boots slapping against tile cracked through the quiet. Tasha didn't even have to turn around. She recognized that stomp. Sharp, purposeful. The sound of someone coming to put out a fire they'd lit themselves. Chuck. He stepped out of the back hallway with his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up. His face already red, not from heat, but from whatever cocktail of stress, ego, and cheap bourbon he lived on these days. "What the hell is this?" he snapped. Tasha turned, coffee still in hand. He was out in the rain, just needed to warm up a bit. Chuck's eyes narrowed, skipping past her and locking on the stranger in the booth. He didn't see a man. He saw a problem. "I said no walk-ins after 9, Chuck barked. "Especially that kind." Tasha's stomach dropped. She placed the pot down slowly, forcing herself to breathe. "That kind?" she asked. Not because she didn't know what he meant, but because she needed him to say it out loud. Chuck didn't flinch. "You know damn well what I mean. Some vagrant shows up, dripping all over the floor, expecting handouts. This is a business, Tasha, not a soup kitchen." She stepped in front of him, heart thudding. "He didn't ask for anything. I offered." "That's not your call," Chuck snapped. "You're a waitress. You follow orders. You don't rewrite house policy because your bleeding heart feels sorry for some stray." Stray. That word hit harder than any curse. Like the man sitting quietly at booth 3 was nothing more than a mutt in need of putting down. Tasha's hands curled into fists at her sides. "Maybe if this place had more heart and less policy," she said quietly, "we wouldn't be chasing out the only decent moment of the night." Chuck leaned in close, his voice dropping into a low, venom-laced whisper. "You think serving coffee to a bum makes you some kind of saint?" "No," she said, It makes me not you." The room froze. The dishwasher, halfway through stacking plates, stopped. The cook peered through the kitchen window, wide-eyed. Even the stranger in the booth, still silent, looked up just slightly, like he wasn't expecting anyone to fight for him. Chuck took a step back, lips curling. "You want to serve them, Tasha? Fine. Serve them unemployment. Clock out. You're done here." Tasha blinked. The words didn't surprise her, but they still hurt. All the extra shifts, all the nights she stayed late to close, the holidays she worked, the way she smiled through every insult from rude customers just to keep things running smoothly. And now she was disposable. Not because she was lazy or dishonest or bad at her job, but because she cared. She untied her apron slowly, folding it with trembling hands. She walked over to the counter and laid it down as if it were an offering. Then she turned toward the man in the booth and placed her hand on the table gently. "You stay as long as you need, all right?" she said, her voice soft but steady. "Coffee's on me." He looked up then, really looked, and for the first time, he spoke. "Thank you." 2 words, but they carried the weight of 1,000 silent rejections. She walked out of the diner without another glance at Chuck, her shoes squeaking on the wet floor as the door swung shut behind her. Outside, the rain had slowed. But inside her, something had started to pour. Not sadness, not regret, conviction. Because that night, in a cheap apron and rain-soaked shoes, Tasha made a choice, and it was the beginning of everything. The sky was gray that morning, not stormy, just dull, like it couldn't be bothered to care. Tasha sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the unopened envelope again, her fingertips resting lightly on it. It wasn't that she didn't know what it said. She did. But something about cracking it open, reading the actual words, made it feel permanent. Still, she tore it open. Her name was typed at the top, followed by the usual corporate jargon: termination due to policy violation, breach of closing procedures, failure to adhere to managerial directives. It was cold, mechanical. Not a single word about who she was, how many shifts she'd covered for sick co-workers, how often customers requested her section, or how she made even the most difficult patrons feel welcome. No, none of that mattered. At the bottom, there it was, scrawled in pen like an afterthought. "Best of luck." And underneath it, a small, curling smiley face. Chuck's signature. It wasn't kind. It wasn't cute. It was mocking. That was Chuck's way. Always pretending to be the good guy while slipping the knife in with a grin. The man who told dad jokes to customers but gave single moms like Tasha extra shifts without notice, or fired them for showing humanity. She crumpled the letter slowly in her hands. That smiley face hurt more than the rest of it, because it reminded her that to Chuck, this wasn't personal. He wouldn't think about it again. She'd be just another poor decision he'd lecture his next employee about. A lesson, a warning, a mistake. But to Tasha, it was her livelihood, her dignity. She got dressed and stepped outside, the morning air crisp against her cheeks. She walked to the corner store, bought a coffee with coins she scraped from the bottom of her purse, and sat on the same bench she always did. But this time, she wasn't people-watching. She was thinking. About everything. She'd played by the rules, smiled when she didn't want to, took abuse from customers and management, and still gave 100% every night. And the one time she broke a rule to do the right thing, she was tossed aside like a used napkin. And for what? Because she dared to be kind? Across the street, she saw someone holding a phone up, facing the diner. A young woman, maybe early 20s, recording video. She was speaking animatedly to someone off camera, gesturing toward the building like she was explaining something big. Tasha squinted. She hadn't seen her before. The woman finished the video, tapped a few things on her phone, and walked off with purpose. Weird, Tasha thought, but she brushed it off. Probably a food blogger or something. She went home, curled up on her tiny couch, and let the silence fill the space. She didn't cry. Not yet. Maybe later. But even as she closed her eyes, her mind wandered back to that man. So calm, so gentle. The way he said her name, even though she never gave it. Thank you, Tasha. She hadn't told him who she was. She sat up. Something about that was off. The news was on in the background, just background noise until suddenly a name slipped through the static. Musk spotted late last night in downtown LA, wearing a hoodie and ducking cameras. She froze. Her heart raced. No. No way. She turned up the volume. Sources confirm the tech billionaire entered a 24-hour diner, reportedly alone and unaccompanied. A waitress served him after hours, breaking company policy. And according to one witness, she may have been fired for it. Tasha stared at the screen, her breath catching. The image flashed across the TV, grainy but recognizable. That profile, that hoodie, it was him. And the story was already out. Chuck's cruel little smile. He had no idea. The world was watching now, and Tasha's story had just begun. Tasha stood frozen in front of the television, her breath shallow, eyes locked on the screen like it might suddenly blink and say, "Just kidding." But it didn't. There he was. The man she'd served soup and coffee to less than 24 hours ago. The same man Chuck had tossed out into the storm with no hesitation. Elon. Freaking Musk. And now it was all over the news. But not in a glossy red carpet kind of way. This wasn't a business deal or a rocket launch. No. This was different, raw, human, real. The headlines didn't scream about innovation or money. They whispered something deeper. Waitress fired after serving Elon Musk. Kindness met with cruelty. Tasha's knees felt weak. She sank slowly into her couch, like the air had been sucked out of her lungs. It was all too much. The flood of memories from last night, the confusion of this morning, the injustice of the firing, and now this whirlwind of attention. And she didn't even know what it meant yet. Her phone buzzed. Once, then again and again. She picked it up. 5 missed calls, all from the same number. Unknown. Then a text popped up. "Are you the waitress from the diner? I'm a journalist from Channel 6. Another one came in seconds later. "Hi, Tasha. My name is Maya. I'm with BuzzPop. We'd love to interview you." And another. "Can we talk? We want to help tell your story." Her stomach flipped. Last night, she was invisible. Today, she was a headline. But still, no job, no justice, no warning, just fallout. Her rent was due in 6 days. Her pantry was half empty. Her savings account had a number so low it made her cringe. This, whatever this was, couldn't feed her. Not yet. And Chuck? He hadn't called, hadn't reached out, not even to apologize or cover his tracks. But the truth was already out. And once truth breaks loose, it doesn't go back in the cage. Still, the attention didn't feel like a solution. Not yet. It felt like a fire, warming and dangerous all at once. She tossed her phone onto the couch and stood up. Her body was tense, nerves buzzing just beneath the surface. She opened the fridge. A single carton of milk, half a loaf of bread, no eggs, no meat. She shut the door. No job meant no income. No income meant no peace. She stared out the window at the street below, watching people pass by like it was any other day. But for her, the world had shifted on its axis. She'd always believed that kindness came back around. That being good, truly good, meant something. But now it felt like she'd been punished for caring. Like doing the right thing had cost her everything. And still, some small, quiet ember inside her wouldn't die out. Because even with nothing, no job, no justice, no warning, she had the truth. And somewhere out there, Elon Musk knew who she was. She just didn't know what he was going to do about it, yet. The parking lot behind the diner was nearly empty when Tasha pulled in. Her old beat-up Honda rattled to a stop like it was just as tired as she was. She sat there for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, watching raindrops gather and slide down the windshield. They blurred the world outside, a soft, hazy mess of red brick, flickering neon, and bad memories. She hadn't planned to come back, not here, not so soon. But something in her chest had drawn her, like unfinished business. Like maybe if she stared at the building long enough, the last 48 hours would make sense. She parked crooked, didn't care. The lot smelled like oil and wet pavement. Her sneakers soaked through almost immediately as she stepped out. She could still see the spot where she'd stood after Chuck handed her that envelope, her apron folded neatly under her arm, her pride in tatters. The same place where her world had quietly unraveled. She leaned against the car now, arms folded tight against the cold, her breath fogging in the air. And then, finally, the tears came. Not dramatic ones, not the kind you scream into, just soft, steady drops, like the rain, silent and uninvited. It wasn't just the job, it was everything. The exhaustion of always being the bigger person, the weight of holding others up while no one held her, the fear of not knowing what came next, the injustice of being punished for kindness in a world that desperately needed more of it. But even through the sting, she didn't feel broken. She felt raw, alive, because underneath the ache, there was something else growing, something fierce, something stubborn, hope. It didn't make sense. She had no plan, no backup, just the clothes on her back and a story that had accidentally gone viral. But for the first time in weeks, people were listening. People who didn't know her name yesterday now wanted to hear her voice. Her inbox was flooded with messages. Some kind, some curious, a few hateful, but mostly support. Strangers calling her brave. Journalists asking for interviews. A woman named Carmen had even offered her a spare room, just in case. And through all the noise, one name echoed louder than the rest: Elon Musk. She didn't know what his next move would be. Maybe he'd ignore it. Maybe his team would sweep it under the rug, like most billionaires do. Or maybe, just maybe, he'd remember the girl who served him soup when she didn't have to. The one who looked at him like a person, not a brand. Tasha wiped her cheeks with her sleeve and let out a slow, shaky breath. "Okay," she whispered to herself. "Let's see where this goes." She got back in her car, turned the key, and watched as the dashboard lit up, a flicker of life in an otherwise uncertain future. The engine groaned but started. Just like her. Not perfect, not smooth, but still running, still moving forward. The internet has a way of turning whispers into roars. It started with a blurry photo, just one. A grainy shot from across the diner parking lot, taken through a rain-streaked window. A man in a hoodie, hunched over a steaming bowl of soup. At first, no one paid it much attention. Just another quiet night in a nowhere diner. Just another rainy face in the crowd. But the internet has eyes, and it doesn't forget a face. Within hours, a thread on a popular forum went viral. Was Elon Musk at a rundown diner last night? Look at this pic. People laughed at first. No way, they said. What's he doing there? Isn't he supposed to be on a jet somewhere? But then another image surfaced, this time from a security camera nearby. The hoodie, the jawline, the unmistakable profile. Someone cross-referenced the shoes. Others pointed to the way he held the spoon, left-handed. Just like Elon. And then it happened. Someone close to his security team, an anonymous leak, confirmed it. Yeah, he went out alone. No press, no team, just disappeared for a night. That was all the internet needed. The story exploded. Billionaire Elon Musk disguised himself to test real-world humanity. Gets quietly helped by Waitress, who gets fired for it. Every platform had a version. TikToks, Instagram Reels, reaction videos, tweets flying faster than they could be read. Waitress. Hero trended within hours. News outlets from CNN to BuzzFeed picked it up. Think pieces flooded timelines. What does this say about society? Would you have served him? But the loudest noise came from Musk's own fan base. Millions of followers demanding a response. His name was trending, not for a new invention, but for an act of quiet observation, and someone else's incredible loss. And then someone found her. A grainy image of Tasha, cropped from a Facebook profile that hadn't been updated in months. It didn't take long. Screenshots of her serving tables, comments from regulars. She was the sweetest waitress. Always had a smile even when the place was packed. Former co-workers chimed in. Customers posted stories. A woman recalled how Tasha once slipped a meal to a homeless vet who couldn't afford coffee. No fanfare, just heart. And now her name was on everyone's lips. Tasha, the girl who served soup to a billionaire. The girl who got fired for doing the right thing. People were furious, outraged, inspired. One thread read, "She didn't know who he was. She just saw a man who needed kindness, and she gave it. That's what makes her different." And yet, through the noise, the hashtags, the media frenzy, Tasha remained quiet, watching, processing. She didn't post a statement. She didn't chase the spotlight, because she hadn't done it for attention. She'd done it because someone looked cold, tired, and hungry. And now the world, her world, was changing before her eyes. But somewhere behind the scenes, the man in the hoodie was watching too, and he wasn't finished yet. The storm didn't come with thunder. It came with notifications. Ping, ping, ping. At first, Tasha thought her phone was glitching. The screen kept lighting up so fast, it barely had time to dim. Messages poured in, some from friends she hadn't heard from in years, others from total strangers. Screenshots of posts, reels, tweets, news headlines, all saying the same thing in different fonts. Waitress fired for serving Elon Musk. She showed kindness and paid the price. The world rallies behind Tasha. She scrolled in disbelief. One post had a picture of her walking in the rain, the diner glowing behind her. The caption read, "This is what grace under pressure looks like." Another was a collage of screenshots from TikTok, showing people reacting to her story, some crying, some outraged, some just staring in stunned silence. A popular creator had even recreated the diner scene with dramatic music, mouthing her lines. The comments? Thousands deep. She's the kind of person we need more of. That manager should be fired. Someone give this woman a job. Better yet, a platform. Then came the shares. Celebrities reposting her story. Influencers tagging her name. Activists rallying support, pushing hashtags like wildfire through every corner of the internet. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, even LinkedIn. Every platform had a version of Tasha, the girl who chose kindness, who got punished, who stood quietly in the aftermath. And then, the donations started. It began with a single GoFundMe. Title: Support Tasha, the waitress with the golden heart. Goal: $5,000. By noon, it passed $50,000. By the evening, it was pushing 6 figures. Tasha stared at the number as it climbed like a rocket. Fast, unreal, defying everything she understood about the world. She hadn't asked for any of this. She hadn't even told her side of the story yet. And still, they believed her. But not everyone was kind. In the comment sections, amidst the sea of love, there were sharks. Probably faked it for clout. If she was a good worker, she wouldn't have been fired. This is why we have rules. It stung, not because she believed them, but because it reminded her how quickly people flipped, how the same crowd that builds you up can turn the next day, how fragile public support really was. The diner's Yelp page, meanwhile, was getting obliterated. 1-star reviews flooded in like a tidal wave. They fired a woman for being a decent human being. Shame on them. Never eating here again. Chuck should be the one packing his bags. Someone even started a petition. Reinstate Tasha. Apologize publicly. Fire Chuck. It had over 100,000 signatures within 24 hours. The diner's PR team issued a vague, too-late statement. We are reviewing the situation and will release a formal update soon. But the damage was done. Screenshots lived forever. So did video clips. So did truth. The internet wasn't just watching anymore. It was deciding. And in the center of it all, Tasha sat cross-legged on her tiny couch, wearing pajama pants and a borrowed hoodie, her phone glowing in her lap. She could barely breathe. Not from fear, not from sadness, from something else. Possibility. Because in just 48 hours, the world had gone from ignoring her to fighting for her. And that quiet storm that started with one act of kindness, it was still building. It happened at 2:16 a.m. Tasha was wide awake, eyes blurry from scrolling, the blue glow of her phone the only light in the room. She hadn't slept more than a few minutes in over a day, not since her world flipped upside down and the internet turned her life into a headline. She was exhausted, overwhelmed, barely holding it together. And then it happened. A vibration, a ping, one simple notification that stopped everything. Elon Musk tweeted. Her thumb hovered over the screen like it had forgotten how to move. She tapped. And there it was. Plain, simple. No hashtag, no PR fluff. Just his words. Kindness matters. What Tasha did was human. Brave. I'm reaching out personally. Below it, a photo of her in the diner, sliding that steaming bowl of soup across the counter to him, not knowing who he was. Her smile, small and tired, caught in motion. His face partly shadowed, still wet from the storm. It wasn't just a tweet. It was a signal to his 180 million followers, to the media, to the world, that he saw her, that her story mattered, and that he wasn't going to ignore it. Within seconds, the post exploded. Likes, retweets, comments pouring in like a floodgate had burst. News outlets snatched it up and ran with it. Elon Musk breaks silence, backs fired Waitress. Musk, what Tasha did was human, brave. Elon Musk pledges to help viral Waitress. Tasha stared at the screen, unmoving. She didn't know how to feel. Her heart thudded in her chest like it was trying to catch up to the moment. Her hands trembled. This wasn't just validation. It was acknowledgement. The richest man in the world had said her name. She blinked and read it again, 3 times. And then her phone rang. Unknown number. Her thumb hesitated. She answered. Hello? Hi, Tasha. This is Ben from Elon's team. He'd like to speak with you. Are you available? She almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it felt impossible. Like someone had knocked the floor out from under her, and she was still somehow standing. Yeah, I'm here. There was a pause, then another click, and then she heard it. That voice. Not from a live stream, not from a stage, but real, direct, human. Hey, Tasha, it's Elon. Her breath caught in her throat. I just wanted to say thank you, he said softly. You didn't know who I was. You didn't care. You just saw someone who needed help. And you helped. Silence. She couldn't speak, could barely think. And I heard what happened, he continued. It's not okay. And I'd like to make it right. The line stayed quiet for a beat. Then he said the words that would change everything. Let's talk tomorrow. I have an idea. She hung up in a daze, the world spinning around her. And somewhere between the disbelief and the adrenaline and the tears welling in her eyes, Tasha finally smiled. Because when Elon Musk tweets your name, it doesn't just change the conversation, it changes everything. Tasha had barely slept. After the scream, after the whisper, after the unshakable chill of knowing someone had been inside her world, she'd ended up at a 24-hour diner across town. Not her diner, a different one. One where no one knew her name, where she could cradle a paper cup of burnt coffee and pretend, just for a second, that she wasn't unraveling. Her phone was on 6%. She hadn't gone back home. She couldn't. Not after what she saw. Not after that email. That call. That figure across the street. But it was the silence that unnerved her most. The world had gone quiet after the noise, and that was never a good sign. Then, at 6:03 a.m., her phone buzzed again. 12 missed calls. 47 unread messages. Trending. Tasha did the right thing. Her heart skipped. She tapped Twitter. The screen flooded with her name. She got fired for helping someone in need? What kind of world is this? We protect Tasha at all costs. This woman is the definition of grace under pressure. Then she saw it. The video. Not from a news channel, not from a gossip site. It was from a customer. A regular, apparently, who'd been in the diner that night. Quiet, tucked in a corner booth. They must have been recording from behind a napkin holder because the angle was low and grainy, but clear enough to capture everything. The man entering, soaked and silent. Tasha serving him soup. Chuck's disgusted look from the kitchen. And finally, the confrontation. You know the rules, Tasha, he'd hissed. People like that, not after hours. And then her reply, calm, tired, defiant. I'd rather be kind and jobless than heartless and employed. The video ended. Her face, his tone, the moment it all cracked open. Over 9 million views in a few hours. She stared at the screen, barely breathing. Then the messages started rolling in faster. News stations, podcasters, influencers, activists. One from a school she'd once volunteered at, asking if she'd speak to their students. One from a charity, asking if she'd like to collaborate. And one, simple and bold, from someone named Jared L., with a verified blue check and a profile pic next to a Tesla. Elon saw the video. "Call me." Her stomach flipped. She clicked the link he'd included. A tweet. At Elon Musk, compassion, compliance. This woman deserves better. Let's fix that. Attached was the video, posted to his 210 million followers. Fired one day, famous next. And yet, Tasha didn't feel famous. She felt overwhelmed, exposed. Like the spotlight had found her too fast, too soon, before she could even catch her breath. But somewhere underneath the exhaustion and adrenaline, something else began to bloom. Not pride, not relief, but purpose. Because this wasn't just about her anymore. This was about every waitress told to smile through abuse. Every worker discarded for choosing humanity over policy. Every unseen person who decided to do the right thing and paid the price for it. Tasha looked out the window of that diner, not hers, but a place that had given her a table in the dark, and she saw the sky softening into morning. The world was waking up, and this time, it knew her name. It had been a strange morning. Tasha hadn't slept much. Her body was tired, but her mind wouldn't stop racing. She'd applied to 3 jobs in the last 48 hours. No callbacks. Not even a rejection email. Just silence. The kind that echoes louder than any no ever could. Still, she got up, made her coffee, and stared out her window like she always did. It wasn't much of a view. Just a cracked sidewalk and the rusted fence of her apartment complex. But that morning, something was different. The air had weight. The kind of weight you feel before a storm, or just before the first line of a story that hasn't been written yet. She didn't know that in less than an hour, her entire life would change because of a single car. Tasha was on her way to the grocery store. Not for much, just some rice, milk, and eggs, if they were on sale. She'd mapped it out in her head. Get in, avoid eye contact, pay cash, get out. Simple. Safe. But fate had other plans. She was walking past the corner lot near the old church when she heard the hum. Not the grumble of a beat-up engine or the whistle of a bus. This was different, smooth, almost futuristic. A Tesla, jet black, polished like obsidian. It glided up the road like it didn't belong on Earth, and then, without warning, it slowed and stopped. Right next to her. Her heart skipped. The window rolled down, just enough to show a familiar face. The one from that rainy night. The man she'd served. The one who barely spoke. The one who looked lost, yet somehow had a mind that lit up the world. "Elon?" she whispered, almost not believing her own voice. He nodded once, softly. "Tasha," he said, "get in." She didn't move at first. Her hand tightened around the grocery list in her pocket, like it was an anchor. But something in his eyes, calm, serious, unshaken, made her let go of the fear. She got in. The door shut with a click that sounded more like destiny than mechanics. The car smelled like leather and cedar. There was no music, just quiet, the kind that feels like a conversation waiting to happen. "I looked for you," he said, driving slowly through the neighborhood. "Why?" she asked. Her voice came out smaller than she expected. "Because you looked at me like I wasn't broken." She swallowed hard. "I didn't know who you were," she admitted. "I know," he said. "That's what made it real." They drove in silence for a while, past the corner store, past the diner she used to work at, now shuttered and cold, a for lease sign taped over the open 24 hours sticker. It looked like a crime scene where kindness had been murdered in daylight. "I'm not here to fix everything," he said finally. "I know I can't." Tasha turned to him, puzzled. "Then why are you here?" He pulled over in front of a small community center she used to walk past every day, the one that always had the "Volunteers Needed" sign and peeling posters about coat drives and soup kitchens. "I have a proposition," he said. He reached into the center console and handed her a folder. Inside was a plan, detailed, thoughtful, and signed. It was for a partnership. Funding, training, resources. Everything she'd ever need to launch her own outreach initiative, built on the very values that had gotten her fired. Empathy, service, human dignity. "I want you to lead it," he said, "because you already are." Tasha stared at the paper. Her hands trembled. "This is too much," she whispered. "No," he said, meeting her eyes. "It's not enough, but it's a start." She didn't cry. Not right then. But something opened inside her, like a gate that had been chained shut for years, finally breaking free. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like a girl who got fired for caring. She felt like a woman about to build something. They drove away from the curb, but the world around her wasn't the same. That one car, silent and sleek, hadn't just pulled up to a sidewalk. It had pulled up to her purpose. And when it rolled back into the street, with Tasha inside and the future unfolding in her hands, it didn't just drive off. It launched a revolution. The room was still. After the ride in Elon's Tesla, after the surreal exchange, the quiet power of that handshake. Tasha had expected noise, chaos, cameras waiting outside the door, someone barking instructions or rushing her toward a stage. Instead, it was just calm. The space he'd taken her to wasn't some tech compound or glass tower. It was a small building tucked behind a community center, wrapped in ivy and warmth. Inside, it smelled like freshly brewed tea and old wood, a sanctuary in the middle of a city that usually never paused. She sat in a chair that didn't match the others, like it had been pulled in at the last minute. There was a slight wobble in its leg. She liked that. Nothing perfect, nothing polished, just like her. Across from her sat a woman, older, with silver curls and a velvet voice. Someone Elon had introduced as Lynn, a friend, a storyteller. "I help people understand who they are when the world tries to rewrite them," Lynn had said. Tasha didn't quite know what that meant, but she listened anyway. "You ever think your story was small?" Lynn asked, sipping tea, eyes locked on hers. Tasha nodded. "All the time." "And now?" She hesitated. "I still think it's small. It just got really loud." Lynn chuckled. "That's where you're wrong." And then she pulled out a tablet and slid it across the table. Tasha looked down. There, in full screen, was a photo she hadn't seen before. Grainy, black and white, taken from a security cam angle. It was her, handing a bowl of soup to a man with rain in his hair and shame in his shoulders. "You see that?" Lynn said. "You didn't just feed him, you saw him." Tasha's throat tightened. "People think heroism is loud," Lynn continued. "Caped, explosive. But real heroes?" She tapped the screen gently. "They're tired, broke, worn down, and still kind." Tasha looked away. "I'm not a hero. I was just doing what my mom would have done." "Then maybe your mom was a hero too." The silence stretched. And then, from somewhere behind the walls, came the sound of voices. Low at first, then louder. Applause, laughter, murmurs of excitement. Lynn stood. "Come with me." Tasha followed her down a hall lined with photos of activists, workers, survivors. No celebrities, no red carpets, just real people who had changed lives, one choice at a time. And then, they entered a room. It wasn't massive, maybe 30 people at most, but it felt like the air inside had shifted. Like electricity crackled between the bodies and the breath and the hope. The moment Tasha stepped in, everyone turned. And then it happened. They stood, every single one. They didn't cheer. They didn't chant. They just looked at her with eyes full of respect, gratitude, and something she hadn't felt in a long time. Belonging. A young girl stepped forward. Couldn't have been more than 10. She was holding a hand-drawn sign. "Thank you for feeding him like my mom feeds me." Tasha's chest cracked wide, and then a woman she didn't recognize, a diner worker from another state who had flown in just to meet her, stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her. "We all saw it," the woman whispered. "You gave us back our dignity." Tasha's knees nearly buckled, and somewhere behind her, Lynn's voice carried like a warm wind. "You're not just a waitress," she said. "You're a mirror, a movement, a reminder that even in a world built to forget people like you, kindness still echoes." The room erupted, not in noise, but in energy. A rising tide of reverence. People coming up one by one, not asking for selfies or autographs, but offering thanks. And in that moment, Tasha finally saw it. She wasn't viral. She wasn't trending. She was remembered. "You're not just a waitress," one man repeated, tears in his eyes. "You're a hero." And this time, Tasha didn't look away. The world had seen her smile. It had seen her tears, her quiet defiance, her viral moment of grace caught on a diner's blurry security feed. But what the world hadn't seen was how alone she felt once the cameras stopped flashing, once the likes plateaued, once the noise got cold. Because fame, Tasha had quickly learned, was a fickle thing. One day, you're a symbol. The next, you're a spectacle. And somewhere in between, the critics come crawling out. "She's just riding the wave. She probably knew who he was all along. Soup doesn't make you a saint." Tasha stopped reading the comments after day 4. It wasn't just the trolls. It was the doubt. The way people started spinning narratives around her like she was a character in a show instead of a human being who'd been fired for feeding a man with tired eyes and wet shoes. And Chuck, the man who handed her that cold, clinical termination letter? He was doubling down. Local news leaked a statement from the restaurant's legal team about her unauthorized act of policy violation and deliberate misconduct. Deliberate. Like compassion was a crime. But the universe had a funny way of keeping receipts. It was a Thursday afternoon when she got the call. She was in borrowed clothes, staying in a temporary apartment Elon's team had arranged until she figured out her next move. No furniture yet. Just a mattress on the floor, a chair by the window, and a suitcase that now felt a little too small for the future rushing at her. The number flashed unknown. Her finger hovered. Then she picked up. "Ms. Nichols?" a woman said, calm, professional. "This is Mara Patel, CEO of Open Hands." Tasha sat up. She'd heard that name before, on the news, in articles, often attached to words like visionary and impact leader. "I've been following your story," Mara continued, "and we'd like to offer you a job." Tasha blinked. "I'm not really looking for restaurant work." Mara laughed softly. "Neither are we. We want you to lead something." Tasha said nothing. "You see," Mara continued, "what you did wasn't just a moment. It was a message. one that businesses everywhere need to hear. That compassion belongs in the workplace. That humanity doesn't clock out when the shift ends. Tasha swallowed. We've been building a program called Compassion at Work, a national initiative to train employers, managers, and frontline workers in empathy-driven leadership. But it needed a voice, a face, a soul. She paused. It needed you. The words felt surreal, like lines from a movie she wasn't supposed to be in. You want me to run this? Creative control, paid speaking gigs, travel budget, a team under you, and full support from us. We'll help you write, develop, shape the whole thing. Tasha looked around the empty room. She had no diploma on the wall, no experience leading teams or crafting curriculums, just a heart that knew right from wrong and hands that had once carried too many plates for too little pay. I don't have qualifications, she whispered. You have something better, Mara replied. You have truth, and the world is starving for it. That was the moment it hit her. Not like a lightning bolt, but like the sun rising after a long, brutal night. She hadn't just survived injustice. She was about to build something out of it. She thought of all the girls like her, the workers too scared to speak up, the kindnesses crushed by policies written in ink and greed. She thought of the haters, the doubters, the ones refreshing their feeds for her fall. Then she thought of what a second chance really looked like. Not as a prize, but as a platform. And suddenly, she stood taller. How soon do you need me? She asked. There was a smile in Mara's voice. We've already booked your first keynote. As the call ended, Tasha stared out the window, city lights blinking back at her like stars in a skyline she finally felt part of. A job? No. This was a mission. And for the first time in her life, it came with a title the haters could never touch. Leader. They always say silence speaks volumes. But in Chuck Rollins' case, it screamed. For nearly 2 weeks, the owner of Millstone Diner said nothing. Not a statement, not a tweet, not even a half-hearted apology shoved into a caption beneath a latte photo on Instagram. The restaurant's social media went dark. Comments were turned off. Reviews plummeted like hailstones. Protesters stood outside holding up signs that said things like, "Serving food shouldn't get you fired," and "Justice for Tasha." And through it all, Chuck stayed hidden. Until he didn't. No one knows what broke him. Maybe it was the endless calls. Maybe it was the local news crew camped outside the diner. Or maybe, and this is just a theory, it was the Tesla parked across the street for 3 hours one afternoon, sleek and silent, with tinted windows that Chuck couldn't see through. But whatever the reason, he snapped. It started with a live stream. Some blurry, handheld phone footage posted by a passerby on TikTok. The screen was shaking slightly, wind in the mic, but you could hear him clearly. Chuck Rollins, red in the face, sleeves rolled up, standing in front of a crowd of reporters like he was auditioning for a courtroom drama. "This has gone too far," he shouted. "I run a business, not a soup kitchen. She broke protocol." His voice cracked. "You all think this is about kindness? This is about control. You give one bowl of soup away and suddenly everyone's a hero? No, that's not how it works." His assistant tried to tug him back, whisper something in his ear. He yanked his arm away. "They act like I'm the villain, but no one talks about what I've built. I gave that girl a job. And this is the thanks I get? A global smear campaign?" He took a step forward, jabbing a finger at the cameras. "She served a man after hours. She used company resources without permission. What was I supposed to do? Reward her for breaking the rules?" The clip cut off after that, but it didn't matter. Within hours, It was everywhere. TikTok, X, Instagram Reels, hashtags like #ChuckMeltdown and #SoupGate were trending globally. One comment read, "Imagine being this mad that your employee had empathy." Another, "Congratulations, Chuck. You just went viral for the worst possible reason." But it wasn't just the public who reacted. Former employees started speaking up. A thread appeared online with the title, "What It Was Really Like Working at Millstone Diner." And it was damning. One by one, anonymous ex-staff members told their stories. Waitresses punished for taking 5-minute breaks. Cooks yelled at for feeding homeless folks leftover bread. A busboy who got docked pay for being 15 minutes late because of a snowstorm. And in every story the same phrase came up. Chuck doesn't care about people, only power. Still, Chuck wasn't done. The next day he tried to go on the offensive. He scheduled a sit-down interview with a local conservative radio host, probably hoping for some damage control. But it backfired spectacularly. Because halfway through the interview, when asked if he would have acted differently had he known the man Tasha served was Elon Musk, Chuck leaned forward, smirked, and said, "If she'd told me it was Musk, I'd have given him the whole damn kitchen." That clip? It broke the internet. The double standard, the arrogance, the utter lack of remorse. By that night, Yelp had flagged the Millstone Diner page for unusual activity. Food delivery platforms suspended them pending investigation, and the "closed until further notice" sign appeared on the door by morning. Meanwhile, Tasha? She was in a different city, preparing for her first speaking engagement. She hadn't said a word about Chuck publicly. Not once. No vengeance. No clapbacks. She didn't have to. The world was doing it for her. And somewhere, as Chuck stared at the blinking cursor on a drafted apology letter he couldn't bring himself to post, a truth was becoming painfully clear. He hadn't just lost an employee. He'd lost everything. All because he couldn't see the difference between policy and humanity. It didn't happen all at once. There was no confetti drop, no red carpet, no blinding flash of cameras the moment she made it. It came like sunlight through curtains, slow, steady, undeniable. Tasha Nichols was no longer just a waitress. She was a movement. One that started with a bowl of soup and bloomed into a tidal wave of hope, compassion, and reckoning. The video of her speaking at the Compassion at Work Summit hit 10 million views in a week. Not because she was famous, but because she was real. She stood on that stage, hands shaking slightly, voice carrying every scar she'd ever earned from years of invisible labor, and said, "I didn't do anything extraordinary. I just didn't turn away." And that line? It caught fire. Teachers printed it on posters for classrooms. Nurses wrote it on their whiteboards. Corporate leaders, the ones who actually listened, quoted her in board meetings. People weren't just watching her. They were changing because of her. From Ohio to South Africa, people began sharing their own stories. Waitresses who paid for a customer's meal, janitors who helped strangers with flat tires, grocery clerks who sat with lonely seniors on their break. Every story signed off with the same words, "I didn't turn away either." And then came the letters. Handwritten, hundreds of them. A school in Atlanta where second graders each wrote her a note. One said, "You made me think being nice is cool." A retired woman from Vermont, "I've lived 72 years with my head down, but your story made me lift it." Even a former manager who once fired a teenager for giving a free drink to a homeless man wrote her an email that simply said, "I was Chuck. Not anymore. Thank you." Tasha read them all. Every single one. She didn't have to. No one expected her to. but that's who she was. Every person mattered, even the silent ones. Especially the silent ones. And with every letter, with every post, with every whispered thank you at a gas station or shouted praise from across a crosswalk, something inside her began to shift. It wasn't pride, it was clarity. This wasn't about virality anymore. It was about legacy. She began doing workshops, not just for companies, but for shelters, food banks, women's centers, teaching people not how to be heroes, but how to see each other. She spoke about the power of small kindnesses, about the cost of silence, about how sometimes policy must bow to presence. And the world listened. Open Hands promoted her to Director of Empathy and Inclusion, a title that didn't even exist until she stepped into the role. They said they didn't create it for her. They created it because of her. She sat on panels next to CEOs and was the only one who asked the janitor in the back for his name. She got invited to conferences and insisted on taking a local high school student with her each time. Someone who'd never left their city, never flown, never been seen. She wasn't just changing lives, she was elevating them. And yet, she never moved fast. She returned every call she could, took selfies with every fan who asked, even when she was exhausted. She sat on panels next to CEOs and was the only one who asked the janitor in the back for his name. She got invited to conferences and insisted on taking a local high school student with her each time. Someone who'd never left their city, never flown, never been seen. She wasn't just changing lives, she was elevating them. And yet, she never moved fast. She returned every call she could, took selfies with every fan who asked, even when she was exhausted, even when her voice was hoarse. She still made soup on Sundays, still tipped 100% at diners. One afternoon, after a keynote in Chicago, a man approached her. He was quiet, thin, clothes too big for his frame. "Tasha?" he said, eyes glassy. She smiled. "Yeah?" He looked down, then back up. "You served my brother that night, the man you helped. He was a veteran, PTSD. He hadn't talked to us in years. That video, it brought him home." Her breath caught. "Thank you," he said. "You didn't just save him. You saved us." She hugged him. No cameras, no applause. Just two people in a hallway, suspended in a moment of raw truth. That's when it really hit her. She hadn't been elevated to fame. She'd been elevated to purpose. And as she walked back into the lobby, past banners with her name, past strangers who knew her face, she whispered a silent promise to herself. "No matter how high I go, I'll always bend low enough to lift someone else." And just like that, the movement kept growing, one heart at a time. The numbers told one story, the faces told another. 27 cities in 9 months, 48 keynotes, hundreds of radio and podcast interviews. Tasha used to think her moment in the spotlight would fade. She thought the world would get distracted, scroll past, move on. And maybe, if she'd stayed silent, it would have. But she didn't. She built something instead, something bigger than her. Table for All wasn't just a clever name. It became a movement of mobile kitchens, support programs, and safe spaces in underserved communities. In her very first initiative, she reopened a shuttered soup kitchen in the same neighborhood where she used to work double shifts just to make rent. Only this time, she wasn't the one being overworked. She was the one handing out paychecks. Every city she visited, she left something behind: a funded program, a scholarship, a staffed initiative. Her rule was simple: if we speak, we build. There would be no empty inspiration, only action. The man she helped that rainy night, the man who sat soaking wet in her section with pain in his eyes and genius in his head, had helped jumpstart the first domino. Elon Musk never wanted credit. In fact, after his name brought attention to her story, he quietly donated $10 million to her nonprofit and then stepped back. "You opened the door," he told her in an email. "I just widened it." But it was Tasha who walked through, and she didn't walk alone. She brought the broken, the brave, the ones who had been overlooked. She created jobs for the formerly incarcerated, trained single moms in business skills, partnered with shelters and social workers to make sure no one ever got fired again just for being human. She gave talks in places people didn't expect, like the boardroom of a tech startup and the cafeteria of a juvenile detention center. Her favorite audience? Fast food workers, retail clerks, service staff who looked stunned when she walked in wearing the same shoes she wore the night she got fired. She kept them as a reminder, scuffed, worn-down black sneakers. Not to remember the pain, but to never forget where she started. One of her most viral speeches came during a graduation ceremony at a community college in Minneapolis. She stood on stage, clutching a single index card, and said, "You might not have a degree from Harvard. Neither do I. You might not have money in the bank. I didn't either. You might not even know what tomorrow looks like. But hear me when I say this. You are enough. Your decency is power. And the world needs you more than ever." The crowd rose to their feet before she even finished. Backstage, a professor with tears in his eyes said, "I've taught for 30 years. I've never seen anyone move people like you just did." But Tasha wasn't interested in being admired. She was interested in mobilizing. The foundation began offering micro-grants to everyday people doing acts of kindness. No strings, no PR campaigns, just trust. And those grants, they turned into pop-up food stations in Ohio, mobile laundry services for the homeless in Arizona, and even a community-run daycare in Baltimore, started by two waitresses who said, "If Tasha can do it, so can we." She didn't make herself the center. She made herself the catalyst. She helped one man. Now she was helping thousands. But the truth, she would have done it all again for just that one man, the soaked, silent stranger who reminded her, and eventually reminded the world, that the smallest gestures often carry the heaviest echoes. And as she walked off stage one night, past a crowd chanting her name, past a mural of her face painted across a downtown wall, someone asked her, "Do you ever miss the old days?" She paused, smiled. "I miss the simplicity," she said, "but not the silence." Because now her voice was louder than policy. Her story was stronger than shame. And her mission? Unstoppable. Sometimes, the most powerful stories don't start with fame, fortune, or a stage. They start in silence, in a tired waitress offering a warm cup of coffee to a man no one else would look at twice. Tasha didn't ask for attention. She didn't expect applause. All she wanted was to do what felt right, to treat another soul with dignity, even when the world around her had turned cold. And for that, she was fired. She walked out of that restaurant with nothing but wet shoes and a heart full of questions. No job, no security, just the echo of a slammed door and a future that suddenly felt uncertain. But the universe has a way of responding to courage. Her simple act, one that most would overlook, set off a ripple. A stranger posted a photo. A story was shared. Screens lit up around the world as millions leaned in to witness something rare. Genuine human decency. And among those millions was someone who would change everything. When the man she served turned out to be Elon Musk, the world couldn't look away. Not just because of his name, but because of hers. Because in a world too often driven by selfishness, Tasha had chosen kindness, and that choice came back around in ways no one saw coming. Job offers flooded in, interviews, messages of support from strangers who saw a part of themselves in her. But more than that, Tasha became a symbol, not of fame, but of hope. She reminded us that decency doesn't have to be loud to be revolutionary. That sometimes, the quietest moments are the ones that echo the loudest. And that in a society quick to dismiss, discard, and devalue. Compassion still matters. So the next time you're faced with a choice, to speak up or stay silent, to step forward or walk away, remember Tasha. Because kindness might cost you something in the moment, but it might just lead to everything you never dreamed possible. And someone, somewhere, will always be watching, waiting, ready to believe again.